Search dogs had lost Harold Mitchell's trail. The 75-year-old veteran had been missing for 3 days, and his family's anxiety was mounting. But helicopter footage shocked everyone. Harold wasn't alone. 10 other elderly men stood beside him, all doing the same thing. But what were they doing? Harold Mitchell's disappearance was discovered on Tuesday morning. His daughter Susan, following her daily routine of checking on her father, found his house empty. The front door stood ajar, his bed appeared slept in, but Harold was nowhere to be found. At 75, showing early signs of Alzheimer's and living alone for nearly a decade since his wife's passing, Harold had wandered off before, but never for this long. Susan immediately called the police, her voice trembling with worry. "My father Harold Mitchell is missing," she said. "He's 75 years old, a Vietnam veteran. He has Alzheimer's, but it's not advanced yet. Sometimes he just gets confused about what day it is." Officer Janet Rodriguez, taking down Harold's information, knew how common these cases were. Elderly people, especially those showing signs of dementia, sometimes wandered away from home when their minds became confused. Usually, they were found nearby, in some familiar location that made sense to them in their altered state. "Are there places Harold usually goes?" Rodriguez asked. "Old friends, a favorite park, somewhere he visits regularly." Susan thought carefully. "He sometimes talks about old work colleagues, but most of them aren't alive anymore. He has friends from Vietnam, but he hasn't seen them in years. Sometimes he remembers the past and acts like he's still living back then." The first day, local police searched for Harold methodically. They checked every park in the neighborhood, hospitals, the Veterans Club. No one had seen him. The second day, the search expanded. Volunteers joined in, social media posts were shared, Harold's photo appeared on local news broadcasts. By the third day, Susan's anxiety had intensified. Her father was diabetic and needed his medication regularly. Moreover, spending cold October nights outdoors could be dangerous for a 75-year-old man. "Please, find him," she pleaded at the police station. "He's all the family I have left. If something happens to him." Officer Rodriguez reviewed Harold's file again. Vietnam veteran, served 1968 to 1970, received a Bronze Star for valor. After returning from war, he worked construction, his wife had died 5 years ago. Susan was his only surviving child. "Does Harold talk about his war experiences?" Rodriguez asked. Susan nodded slowly. "In the old days, he never spoke about it. But in recent years, sometimes he talks about Vietnam like it happened yesterday. He remembers his buddies' names, describes operations in detail. The doctor said it's part of Alzheimer's, he forgets recent events but distant memories become clearer." That morning, an idea occurred to Officer Rodriguez. Could we access Harold's old military records? Maybe if we learn what areas he served in Vietnam, he might have gone to similar places here. A few hours later, Harold's military records arrived. 1st Cavalry Division, Airmobile. He had served primarily in search and rescue operations. Dangerous missions finding lost soldiers, rescuing pilots behind enemy lines. "Search and rescue," Rodriguez murmured. Maybe his old instincts kicked in. That afternoon, search efforts intensified. Police helicopter units were deployed, beginning to scan forested areas and remote regions around the city. Helicopter pilot Mike Chen noticed something unusual during the second hour of aerial searching. In a wooded area north of the city, there was human activity in a small clearing. Zooming in, he saw a group of elderly men working in an organized fashion. "Control, this is unusual," he radioed. In the forest area, approximately 10 to 12 elderly men. "Looks like they've set up some kind of camp." When Rodriguez received the coordinates, she was surprised. This was outside the city, near an old training ground. An area that had been used for military exercises in the 1970s, now abandoned. When the ground search team reached that location, the scene they discovered was incredible. Harold Mitchell was there, but he wasn't alone. 11 other elderly men were with him. All in their 70s, all Vietnam veterans. And they were all doing the same thing. They had established a temporary camp. Tents, fire pit, organized layout. They moved as if planning a military operation. Harold appeared to be the group's leader, giving instructions to the others. "Harold." Officer Rodriguez called out. "Everyone's been looking for you." Harold turned and looked at Rodriguez. His eyes held a strange clarity. "Officer, we're trying to complete a mission here," he said calmly. "Charlie Company is missing. We can't leave this area until we find them." Rodriguez understood Harold's mental state. He had returned to 50 years ago. In his mind, he was again the young soldier searching for lost comrades in Vietnam. But the strange thing was, the other elderly men were behaving the same way. As if they were all in the same time period, on the same mission. "Who are you?" Rodriguez asked the other men. One of them, a 73-year-old man named Walter, stepped forward. "We're Harold's old unit buddies," he said. "He called us. Said, Charlie Company is missing, we need to find them. So we came." Rodriguez was amazed. You really came here after 50 years because Harold called you?" Walter smiled. "Officer, Harold saved us in Vietnam. We were lost behind enemy lines, he found us and brought us to safety. If he's searching for lost people now, we'll search with him." As Rodriguez listened to these elderly men's story, she was moved. Harold's Alzheimer's had brought back his past, but it had also revived bonds formed 50 years ago. Rodriguez learned more about this extraordinary gathering. Walter explained that Harold had somehow obtained phone numbers for his old Vietnam buddies and called them over the past week. His calls weren't entirely coherent, but the message was clear: he needed help finding lost soldiers. "Harold called me last Sunday," said Frank, a 74-year-old former medic. "He was talking about coordinates, about Charlie Company being in trouble. At first, I thought it was just his condition, but something in his voice, it was like the old Harold, our squad leader." Another veteran, Tommy, nodded in agreement. "We all got similar calls. Harold kept saying no one gets left behind. That was our unit motto. When Harold says that, you respond." Rodriguez discovered that these men had traveled from different states. Walter drove 8 hours from Ohio. Frank flew in from Arizona. Tommy came from upstate New York. All because their former squad leader had called for help. The camp they'd established showed remarkable military precision despite their age. Everything was organized according to field manual standards: supply area, communications post, command center. Harold had assigned each man specific duties based on their old military occupational specialties. Harold's mind might be cloudy about recent things, Walter explained, but when it comes to military operations, he's sharp as ever. He remembered everyone's strengths, positioned us accordingly. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geriatrician who specialized in Alzheimer's cases, was called to evaluate Harold's condition. What she found challenged conventional understanding of the disease. "This is remarkable," she told Rodriguez privately. "Harold's procedural memory, the kind used for learned skills and routines, is functioning at a very high level. His episodic memory for recent events is impaired, but his semantic memory for military procedures is intact." She observed Harold interacting with his former comrades. Being with these men seems to activate neural pathways that have been dormant. It's like muscle memory, but for the mind. As the afternoon progressed, Rodriguez learned each veteran's story. This wasn't just a random gathering of old soldiers, they were a genuine unit, bonded by shared trauma and triumph. During the Vietnam War, Harold's squad had been part of a search and rescue operation that went terribly wrong. They'd been inserted deep into enemy territory to find survivors of a downed helicopter. The mission lasted 6 days instead of the planned 2. They faced enemy fire, harsh terrain, and dwindling supplies. Harold kept us together, Frank recalled. When our radio got damaged and we couldn't call for extraction, he improvised. Used his compass and map to navigate us back to friendly territory. Saved all our lives. The bond forged during those 6 days had lasted decades, though the men had lost touch over the years. Marriages, careers, geographic moves had scattered them across the country. But Harold's call had reactivated something deeper than friendship, a brotherhood forged in combat. Tommy showed Rodriguez a faded photograph he'd brought with him. This was us in 1969, after the mission. We swore an oath that day, no matter how old we got, if one of us called for help, we'd come. The photograph showed 11 young soldiers, dirty and exhausted but alive. Harold stood in the center, barely recognizable as the elderly man before them now. But his eyes held the same determined expression Rodriguez had seen when she first approached the camp. Susan arrived at the scene as emergency responders and family members were being contacted for the other veterans. Seeing her father in his element, surrounded by men who clearly respected him, she experienced a mix of relief and wonder. "Dad, you scared me," she said, embracing Harold. Harold looked at his daughter with momentary confusion, then clarity returned. "Susan, honey. We were looking for lost soldiers." "I know, Dad. But you found them. Look around, all your friends are here and safe." Harold surveyed his former squad mates, and something shifted in his expression. The intensity of command began to ease, replaced by simple joy at reunion. Dr. Chen observed this interaction with professional interest. "Mr. Mitchell, how do you feel right now?" Harold considered the question carefully. "Proud," he said finally. These men answered the call. After all these years, they still answered the call. Walter clapped Harold on the shoulder. "We always will, Sergeant. That's what we promised." The term sergeant triggered something in Harold's memory. He straightened slightly, unconsciously assuming military bearing. "At ease, soldiers," he said with a slight smile. Mission accomplished. Over the following hours, as the formal search was concluded and the veterans prepared to disband their impromptu camp, something remarkable happened. Instead of returning immediately to their distant homes, the men decided to extend their reunion. Walter suggested they spend the evening sharing memories and catching up on their lives. What had started as a rescue mission became a celebration of survival and friendship. They gathered around their campfire as darkness fell. One by one, each man shared what his life had been like since Vietnam. Some had thrived, others had struggled. Several had battled PTSD, others had found success in business or family life. But all carried the war with them in different ways. Harold always said Vietnam wasn't just about surviving the war, Frank reflected. It was about surviving what came after. Coming home to a country that didn't understand what we'd been through. Harold, despite his cognitive challenges, seemed to understand every word. His responses might come slowly, but they showed deep comprehension of his comrades' experiences. Susan watched her father with new eyes. She'd known he was a veteran, but she'd never truly understood what that meant to him. Seeing him with these men, she glimpsed the leader he'd once been. The next morning, as the veterans prepared to return to their respective homes, they made a pact. Harold's condition would only worsen over time, but they wouldn't let him face it alone. "We're going to set up a rotation," Walter announced. "Each of us will visit Harold regularly. He might forget recent conversations, but he'll remember us. We're part of his long-term memory." Tommy nodded. "And when the time comes that he can't remember us either, we'll still be here. Because that's what brothers do." Susan was overwhelmed by their commitment. "You don't have to do this. I know you all have your own lives, families." Frank shook his head. "Ma'am, with respect, Harold saved our lives in Vietnam. Now it's our turn to save his. Different kind of battle, same principle." Dr. Chen, who had observed the entire reunion, spoke with Susan privately. What these men are offering isn't just friendship, it's therapy. Familiar faces, shared memories, consistent social interaction. For Alzheimer's patients, this kind of structured support can significantly slow cognitive decline. Over the following months, the veterans kept their promise. Walter visited monthly, flying in from Ohio. Frank arranged his retirement travel schedule to include regular stops to see Harold. Tommy drove down every few weeks. During these visits, Harold's lucidity improved markedly. He might not remember what he'd eaten for breakfast, but he could recall detailed Vietnam missions when talking with his squad mates. Susan learned to cherish these clear moments. During veteran visits, her father became the man she remembered from childhood, confident, caring, protective. "Dad seems like himself again when you're all here," she told Walter during one visit. "That's because he is himself," Walter replied. "Alzheimer's might be stealing his recent memories, but it can't touch what we built together in Vietnam. That's bedrock, it goes too deep for the disease to reach." Harold's story became something of a local legend. The veteran who got lost and found his brothers instead. Newspaper articles were written, TV interviews conducted. But for Harold and his squad, the attention missed the point. "This isn't about being heroes," Harold said during a lucid moment with a reporter. "This is about keeping promises. We promised we'd never leave each other behind. 50 years later, that promise still matters." The interviewer asked what advice he'd give to young veterans returning from modern conflicts. Harold thought carefully before answering. "Find your squad. The people who understand what you've been through. Hold on to them. You're going to need each other, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday you will. And when that day comes, make sure they can find you." As Harold's Alzheimer's progressed, the regular visits from his Vietnam brothers provided stability in an increasingly confusing world. Even when he couldn't remember their names, he knew their faces. Even when he couldn't recall recent conversations, he felt their loyalty. Susan documented these visits, creating a record of her father's final clear years. She wanted to preserve not just his memory, but the memory of the brotherhood that sustained him. "These men taught me something about love," she wrote in her journal. "Not romantic love, but the kind forged in crisis and tested by time. They show up not because they have to, but because they choose to. Every single time." In his final months, when Harold's condition had deteriorated significantly, his squad still gathered around his bedside. They told old stories, sang songs from their youth, shared silence when words weren't enough. The day Harold passed away, Walter, Frank, and Tommy were there. They'd traveled cross-country to be present, just as they'd promised in that makeshift camp 3 years earlier. At Harold's funeral, the veterans served as pallbearers. They wore their dress uniforms, medals gleaming, shoulders straight despite their age. The American flag draped over Harold's casket was folded with military precision and presented to Susan. On behalf of the United States Army and Harold's squad mates, Walter said formally, "We thank you for sharing your father with us. He was our leader, our brother, our friend. Sergeant Mitchell is home now." Susan kept that flag, but more importantly, she kept the friendships her father's final mission had restored. The veterans continued to stay in touch, checking on each other, honoring the bonds Harold had reminded them were still strong. Harold Mitchell's last search and rescue operation had been his most successful. He hadn't found lost soldiers in the woods that day, he'd found lost brotherhood in the hearts of men who thought they'd forgotten how to need each other. And in finding them, he'd found himself again, if only for a while. Which was enough. Which was everything. The brotherhood survived its leader, just as it had survived the war that created it. Harold's legacy wasn't just in the lives he'd saved in Vietnam, but in the reminder that some bonds transcend time, distance, and even memory itself. Susan often returned to those woods where her father had gathered his squad for the last time. Standing in that clearing, she could almost see them, 11 old soldiers around a campfire, keeping faith with promises made when they were young and afraid and far from home. They had left no one behind. Not even Harold. Especially not Harold, and in the end, that was the most important mission of all. Don't forget to subscribe to Heart Animal Stories for more incredible true stories that celebrate courage, loyalty, and the connections that define our humanity. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could restore your faith in the power of brotherhood and the strength of promises kept.